For people who grew up in abusive relationships, whether that abuse was inflicted on by a parent or a sibling, a family member, or even a relative, such people tend to struggle a lot in life, especially with relationships. Some might struggle with all relationships, such that every relationship they're in, they find it difficult and impossible to deal with. Others might struggle with specific relationships, such as romantic relationships. Others might struggle with relationships with men of a particular age or women of a particular size. And one thing that we need to understand is that the relationship patterns that we form in adulthood, the way we build trust, the way we set expectations in our relationships, the way we respond, the way we argue, the way we resolve arguments, the way we protect ourselves in different relationships, all these relationship patterns tend to originate from the relationships that we formed in our formative years in life, in our developmental period, which is usually the first 12 years of life. So if you're in an abusive relationship in the first 2 years of your life, the way you formed an attachment to that person who was abusing you is probably going to lay the foundation of how you form attachment styles with other people going forward. The way you build trust or distrust, the way you set expectations, that's going to be the foundation. And unless you become very aware, very conscious that these are the patterns that you formed with this person and that they might not work with another person, you're likely to carry that foundation forward to all the other relationships that you're going to form. So whatever you learn in the first few years of your life about a relationship is likely going to continue being used in all the other relationships that you're going to get into. And so one of the ways that people in abusive relationships try to cope with the situation, especially in childhood, is one, they become very vigilant, they become very alert, because they know at any time they could be abused, at any time they could be traumatized, at any time they could be, violated. And so they're constantly vigilant. That becomes a response to survive in that relationship. Because if you're not vigilant, then you're going to be caught off guard, and that's probably going to hurt more than when you're prepared. There will be other survival responses that they're going to use for that relationship, but not knowing that because it's their first relationship, it actually lays the foundation for them. And so it starts forming a part of their temperament, a part of their personality as they grow older. And so when a child is in an abusive relationship and they feel helpless and powerless, one of the things that they might try to do is to avoid the person who's abusing them. So if that person is their mother and is in the living room, the child will always be outside or in the bedroom. If the mother is in the kitchen, they're usually trying to avoid the person who is abusing them. And if they cannot do it physically, then they might do it mentally. So they might start getting preoccupied with these fantasies of creating a distance between them and the person abusing them as a way of trying to cope with that abuse. And so later their desire becomes true, their dream becomes true. They manage to be financially dependent and they're adults, so they can go out on their own. And they do manage to create that distance. So they stop calling, they live far apart from the person who was abusing them. And for them, they think that that is the absolute solution. Once I create distance between me and the person who abused them, then my life is going to be mine. I'll be in charge. I'll be able to feel whatever it is that I want to feel. I'll be able to get whatever it is that I was not able to get in that relationship. That's how they've conditioned themselves now to believe. That's the attitude they have. And so now that they're apart, they still find themselves struggling to be happy. They're still unhappy. They still struggle to make their life better. Yes, they're able to find a job. They're able to create other relationships. But there are parts of their lives where relationships are still very problematic. Like I said, some people get affected in all their relationships. Others get affected in some of their relationships. So here, for example, a person is able to create a good relationship with colleagues, but then at home, they're not able to form a healthy relationship. And for them, because this has to work, because it is the solution that I've dreamt about all my life, then they start having this statement in response that it should work, it must work. So I must find a way to be happy in it because this is the only solution. The reason why we were not happy is because we were being abused by that person when we were children, when I was a child, but now I'm an adult. It's my life. I should be able to be in charge. And one thing that they overlook that is an obstacle for them is the impact that that abuse has had on their personality, on their identity, on the way that they respond in relationships, on the way that they build trust or distrust in relationships. So that impact now lives in them. It's formed who they are. So when they're getting into relationships, they're finding people who are going to make them feel familiar. And familiar is the abuse that they experience, except now they're choosing who's going to abuse them without knowing it. So when they find someone who makes them feel safe, that discourages them, that puts them off because it's unfamiliar. Safe is strange for them. So they go and find someone who makes them feel unsafe. They look for people with whom they can form an anxious attachment if that's what they had when they were growing up. They look for someone